Welcome to the fifth YouTube video on this 1974 Mercury Capri that has finally gotten back into the garage. We finished taking apart the Mustang, the 2005 Mustang that we hope will be a donor, certainly for the engine and the transmission. Those end up being pretty easy. But now I'm just double checking the geometry of the front end of the stock Capri, and then we're going to move to finishing cleaning it out for lemons. It's funny, the back of the Capri, they've just put in foam, kind of this, blow-in foam that holds the water right up against the metal. Those rear quarters are totally rotted away because of that foam. Anyway, we still have some stuff to take out, brake lines, and particularly the master cylinder and vacuum assist master cylinder there. That proves to be difficult, along with the pedal assembly, along with most of the dash stuff on this Capri. It just is incredibly tightly packed and not incredibly intuitive on how some of it comes apart, particularly the pedal assembly, and we'll get into that in a minute. I have a little rant on it. Seats came out easily enough. These will go on to eBay. I hope they'll be useful for somebody who's, might be restoring one of these. But the seats, and then I'm working on the rear axle. I want to slide that Mustang rear axle under there and see, how things are going to line up. There was our dog Moose. You also saw my son Keaton and his friend Landon helping out. Again, a big thank you to Landon for all his help. Here we're getting the U-bolts off the axle and a little bit of cleanup. We don't usually show that in the stop action motion. There's actually a lot of that. Everything you do to this leaves more rust behind. Taking the rear spring shackles off so I can roll that axle out the back is the plan here. Keaton is still working on the interior and the dashboard. The heater core was also hard to remove on this Capri. I do not know how they put it together, to be honest. I mean, there are bolts that you just couldn't get at without everything removed, and maybe they did those bolts first, but anyway, you'll see a lot of us underneath that dash, and it's stop motion, and a lot is edited out. Anyway, Keaton's got the seats, he's got the rocker panel covers, and again, these will go on eBay, offset costs, and then there's that rear axle out of the way, and here's the Mustang rear axle. The shocks actually line up pretty good. They come in, they will be able to hit the same general area and drill a new hole, put new backing on it, but essentially the shocks will be fine. The width of the axle is the main problem. The kind of the face of those disc brakes where the wheel bolts to, that sits right on the outside of the body of the car. So we either have to really cut the fenders, or we have to shorten the axle. Or it turns out the Ford Ranger used that same 7.5-inch axle, Ford axle, and that is the early Ranger anyway, is close to the same width as the Capri axle. So if we can use the, find an early Ranger axle, and if the disc brake components will bolt to it, those are big F's. Anyway, I've got to do some research there, because I'd rather not cut the Mercury, although those wheel wells are completely rusted out anyway, and it wouldn't really matter. It's just kind of the principle of the thing, why you do that to a classic, right? Anyway, um, here we're getting the headliner out, and then you're going to see plenty of dash. We'll work on the dash for a little bit, then our attention will shift to easier things. Keaton, I got to hand it to Keaton. He spent a lot of time under there getting things undone, and just kind of stuck to it, where I would go, you know what, I'm going to start throwing things if I keep doing this. So anyway, we're fighting with this heater core. There was a bolt that's like behind the wiper motor, and we wanted to keep the wiper motor. We'd like to keep the wipers just in case we have bad weather during the race. Anyway, let's see, more work on the pedal assembly and wiring under there. And then time to get rid of this carpet. I was coughing just thinking about it. Anyway, that out of the way, and wiring harness came out considerably easier than the Mustang wiring harness. And I do cut it here because I just need to run power to that for the tail lights. And then you'll see me fighting with this pedal assembly. And I'm gonna take a few minutes to rant about that with some pictures here in a second. But just, this is a really edited version of the time it took. And we just keep working with bushings and clips and screws and bolts that you can't get at. And you really are just, how did they do this? Okay, so this is the firewall side where the master cylinder mounts to. Those 3 bolts we could get to, but this 4th one we could not. We pulled the clutch cable and the accelerator cable to try and get more space. There were access ports up here to help with that, but one of them was glued down and one of them wasn't. Okay, here's the pedal assembly out. It's facing, this is if you were looking at it from the firewall side. I'm sorry, it's not a great picture. It doesn't really matter. We're just going through all the bolts that you had to get to remove the thing. And then ultimately you had to remove the brake pedal connection to the master cylinder. And we started working on the clips on the top. It ended up being these lower clips you had to do, and a 2-part bushing that had to come out, all while the thing was still in the dash. You couldn't actually remove the thing, let's see, until you got the master cylinder removed, and that's the accelerator clip. That was also hard to get at. Anyway, once you got that all done, and that really difficult to get bolt, these 2 last bolts let you get the thing apart. It was really miserable. It occurred to me afterwards, here's the interior all stripped out. You have to strip the interior for lemons, for fire safety. Speaking of fire safety, we're going to take this fuel tank out. I don't know if we'll reuse it or if we'll get a fuel cell. We've got to still make that decision. Anyway, that pedal assembly, it occurs to me that the Capri is based on the Ford Cortina, which was British originally, I think. And so it may be lifted off the British design, which would have had the pedals on the other side, the steering wheel and the pedals on the other side. And I think if they were on the right-hand side of the car, then they may have been a lot easier to get at some of those connections. Anyway, it ended up being it's actually a couple days working on that dash. Now we're going to take that front axle out because I would like to see if we can use the Mustang. Again, the Mustang's got 5-lug wheels, much bigger brakes, disc brakes all the way around versus drums on the back. It's got an anti-lock brake system that we should be able to wire back up and have in the car, which could be useful. And the other thing about it is, if anything breaks on the original Capri stuff, where do you find even a wheel bearing or a tie rod end or strut or what have you for a 1974 Capri versus a 2005 Mustang. That's the first year. I think they did 2005 to 2014 is all kind of the same on the Mustang, which would make our lives a lot easier. So here we're doing a lot of measurements, trying to see, okay, what would it take to put the front end in? And we have the makings of a plan. So ignore the perspective. It's not as bad as it looks from this photo. But if we remove the hydraulic steering rack, and then we cut out 4 inches in the middle and re-weld it, we've got a TIG welder, and just hold everything straight, right? We remove those 4 inches, and then the frame width now matches the frame width on the Capri. And again, perspective makes that look like it wouldn't work. Then we move the manual rack over, probably take the tie rods, or the tie rods there, the steering control arms off them, and adapt them to the manual rack on the Capri. The manual rack on the Capri steering rack is also the same rack that was used in the Pinto, and so that is still available, and we'll probably pick up a spare. It's $100 on eBay, new, so, or rebuilt anyway. The manual steering rack, I think we could use it and shorten, in principle, we can shorten that up. All right, so you see me I'm trying to fit the engine, but Keaton's not available this evening, and so I said, I'm not going to be able to tilt it and get it in. The engine and transmission, I couldn't drop it in the top without tilting it, and I didn't have my tilting, I don't have the tilting thing, so I just lifted the front of the car, slid the engine underneath, and then lowered the car back on it. So that then I could just lift the engine up with the hoist and set it where it would be. And actually, there's no surprises here. This is essentially the same block as what the Capri block is. Makes twice the horsepower, but footprint's the same. There's plenty of space for this V6, and we're excited. Again, if I just put all the Capri drivetrain back in it, the Capri front end and rear, we'd be fine. But I'd rather use those Mustang components if I can. Thanks for watching. More soon, and hit like if you liked it. Thanks.